half doing the second, answering whatever people want to hear. Or
It's your show, Barry.
But I want to just want to make sure this goes live before I start really raining through stuff. Make sure people get in here first. Are you excited, Sheets? I haven't seen you this happy in a while.
Oh, you kidding me? Anything but the freaking NBA.
All right, yeah, we're all good to go. Okay, cool. So Bobby is gonna. What I want to use Bobby for in this situation is to do two things. So one, I'm going to use him to help him out with just the picks of like, hey, you should play this guy and that guy and stuff. And what that's also going to do is handle a lot of where I believe ownership is going to go. I don't. I want to add that I'm seeing a lot of drastically different ownerships from different sites. I think people are drastically, or people are approaching this race as if it's like a normal super speedway. Typically, what that is, Bobby, is these are the races that you think of when you think of like traditional NASCAR. You think of cars in big crashes, flipping over, and that's every race but the ones tonight. Tonight is basically a glorified like practice session at this point in time, and so it's usually boring and there's not a lot of passing and going through the field, and so you normally in these races and within like the big tracks you want to stack from the back, and that's really what it seems like people are doing. Whereas in a race that is going to be boring, there's not going to be a lot of passing and stuff. I think that the main way to attack both of these races is to target drivers and manufacturers starting from the 4th position to around the 14th, 15th position. When we look at the top of the grid with Logano, so Logano has earned the pole for the Daytona 500 on Sunday. This is the first time in almost 7-8 years that Hendrick hasn't been in charge of the front row, which technically means that like they're locked in the front 2 starting positions. So they typically don't race in these races. They just go to the back of the field, let everybody pass them because they're guaranteed starting 1st and 2nd. We have Logano starting 1st this year. And he has traditionally raced very aggressive in these races. He's been up front in a majority of them. He's been spun for the win on the white flag in this race in 2022. I think people are going to be off of playing Logano here. I'm going to have at least 25% of Logano. The other main plays in this race that I want to focus on are people that are good at plate races, that have traditionally good average running positions and good survival ratings when we look at all these races together. And so drivers that check off those boxes are people like Chris Buescher, people like Ross Chastain, Austin Dillon, Chase Elliott, Daniel Suarez. These are traditionally guys who are usually running between 1st and 15th in the big races here, and even in these dual races here before we get into any yellows or any chaos or wrecks taken out of the race. This is where I want to focus on guys who are good and run well in these races.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So you mentioned that this is a kind of a glorified practice race. Why don't you get into that a little more with a couple these comments that I have? I've heard something to the effect, and you can talk about this too, that there were a couple of guys, not to like step on your toes, that need to particularly do well to make it to the next round. And how does that impact, how aggressively they're going to race? How does that impact how the rest of the field is going to know that already? Do we care about that? And what is really the incentive for these drivers in this particular race? Tell me a little more about like the practice aspect of this and how that's going to affect what we want to do.
So what NASCAR has done when it comes to races at Daytona, Talladega, and Atlanta, they only have one practice session for the entire year in order to save costs so they're not accidentally wrecking or whatever happens. And so even for like this, basically the Super Bowl for NASCAR, they haven't practiced before this race. They just qualified last night. And because of that, we have 42 cars attempting to make a 40-car field on Sunday. The 3 people who are in this race that needed to race in on speed and qualifying yesterday were J.J. Yaley, Jimmy Johnson, and Anthony Alfredo. Anthony Alfredo made it in on speed. That car has not – they didn't make the race last year. They didn't make the race the year before. They've been caught up in wrecks in the duels. I, for one, don't even see them even risking it. Beard Motorsports is a team that traditionally, if they have any sort of damage, they just don't repair it in the race. and they just don't really stand a chance. And so Alfredo starting 11th, in my opinion, is probably the least attractive play on the entire slate because he has absolutely no incentive to even be near any other car during this event. I'll get back to the practice session in a second. The other two cars who are directly competing with each other to try and make the 500 is Jimmy Johnson starting 18th and JJ Yaley starting 21st. Now, if you looked in the Discord, Astukas posted basically a very convoluted way of showing that Jimmy Johnson is practically locked in through really any situation. So it's really not a conversation to be had of will Yaley, pass Jimmy Johnson or will Jimmy Johnson not make this race? There's very few situations for Jimmy Johnson to not advance here. And so that really eliminates Jimmy Johnson from having to be overly aggressive to try and beat Yaley. And it really just makes it to where he's probably going to be surrounded and helped by the Toyotas because he's Legacy is now a Toyota backed team. And so they are most likely going to be rolling with Ty Gibbs, Martin Truex Jr., Tyler Reddick for a majority of this event. And so with Yaley, like he's just kind of SOL. This car is slow. I don't foresee a chance he even stays with the pack or is even like vile. Like I don't see him being competitive at all. And so in that aspect, I don't believe that there's any attention that needs to be had towards that. The practice situation, and as I said, we haven't had any practice yet. We have one practice session tomorrow or Saturday. I'm pretty sure it's tomorrow for the 500. And the only thing that needs to be tested is how the new Ford bodies and how the new Toyota bodies handle in the draft. That's really all that these teams are going to be trying to figure out here. I don't really foresee it as a situation of they're going to be racing overly aggressive, causing mistakes, causing wrecks. It's really just like a shakedown run for all these teams, and this goes for both of the two races tonight.
Why? One more question. Why is this race going to behave any different than the other races this weekend? You mentioned that like most plate races and most races like this are wreck fests. They're you play place differential, whatever. What is it about this race that makes it different if it's on the same track? Is it just less laps, less motivation? Like what is it all about?
So there's two answers to that. One is the answer that NASCAR uses, and that is to just fill your starting positions for Sunday, which that really doesn't matter, but that's the main selling point that NASCAR uses. The real reason why is that there is no money given out in this. There is no financial incentive for the teams to race stupid with their $350,000 vehicle in this. Like this, it's financially like not wise for these teams to race aggressive at all. Like if they make a mistake here and tear up a car, like they're not only putting the team back this weekend, but they're also putting the team back because we're racing at a very similar track next week as well. And so you're basically hindering your team for the next 2 weeks if you mess anything up here.
Okay.
And so when I'm looking for this, people that I'm wanting to be overweight on and try and build around, I also want to add that I'm not concerned about salary at all.
I was going to ask that, like, what do you leave on the table? Like, what are you willing to leave on the table in a situation like this?
So I'm going to use SaberSim as an example here because I don't know if other people are doing this as well, but it seems like SaberSim has kind of overcorrected the fact that this is on one of these bigger tracks where wrecks happen a lot, and they've really overcorrected. And like they have like Yaley, who I just mentioned, like this should have been caught through like just paying attention to the numbers. As I just said, Yaley's in a slow car which hasn't been performing well at all, and he's a top 6 scorer on DraftKings projected for this race with high ownership. I don't believe that's accurate at all. I think some places are assuming that you're going to have to chase the very expensive place differential in this race, for example, like a Martin Truex, a Tyler Reddick, and stuff like that. And if you are going that direction, you are going to end up with very little salary left over. But as I said, I'm chasing 4th through 14th, and so I have anywhere from 1,100 left over to 5,400, 7,000, 6,000 on some of my lineups. Salary is very non-existent for these two races and for the races this week in general.
No, that's helpful.
I'm just looking at my raw points that I've projected for, and I'm chasing those.
Let me ask you sort of a line of construction question with that in mind. So you take a guy like JJ Yaley or someone else that's like 5,400, like Daniel Hemrick or something like that, and let's just say that in and of themselves, they might not be good plays, but the way we think about this in basketball is that we're willing to eat like a terrible 3K play to get 2-3x if it avails us of something real of a stud or something like that. Is there anybody like that, like in this race that we really need to get to? Because it doesn't seem that way with respect to just based on the ownerships I'm seeing and stuff.
Certainly not in the value range. I think the two people you need to get to today is Busher at $7,800 and Chastain at $82. Those are my two favorite plays on the slate today, and I'm going to be overweight on the field to those. But in the value range, there's not really an answer, or there's not a person in that range for that answer.
Well, I didn't mean that. I meant the opposite. I meant that was there an expensive guy that you wanted to get to, which would justify playing a terrible value guy?
I think if so, yes. So if you were building either a place differential lineup, chasing it, or a Toyota lineup, which is identically the same thing, you would primarily play Truex, Reddick, and Ty Gibbs together. And so those three drivers together leave you 7,600 on average for your lineups. And so if you're chasing specifically like those individuals, or if you're chasing a Toyota stack, you can add Jimmy Johnson into that as well. At that point, that is where you would and why I think SaberSim is leaning towards like wanting to use value plays, because they're heavily projecting the place differential to come through. So if you're chasing that, or if you're using the Toyota drivers, that's why you would end up in that range.
One more question, and then I'll just kind of let you go. Is these are the things that I think about. So is when you're dealing with a race like this where not everybody's like gunning for it. You know what I mean? Like not everybody's going. I would wonder if I could find someone who was gunning for it. And I don't know like the drivers per se. And I was going to ask this with respect to like NASCAR in general this year. So I'm going to put these two questions out there. Is who, knowing all the drivers and knowing all the cars and knowing whatever. Let's say it was the end of last season, whenever it ended, October. Who are the drivers and who are the cars that you felt, boy, just give me like another two races. They're right on the cusp of like breaking through. You know what I mean? Like an up and coming driver that could really just take that next step. That like maybe we could be early on this year. Like before he actually does win something, or somebody that was having really, really good momentum. And I guess my second question regarding that is there someone like that in a field like this where most people would be like, well, just take it around the track and do whatever. But is there a guy out there who says, I want to beat these people? I want to get this win. I want to show out. I want to get third or fourth, even if it doesn't mean anything.
So there's actually a team and two drivers that answer that and falls into that, and that is Corey LaJoie and Carson Hocevar, 7,400 and 7,200 respectfully. LaJoie, piggybacking right on the question of who was doing better and should show improvement this year, it's LaJoie. But that team in general, with LaJoie and Hocevar, should perform better. And the reason I bring them up to answer this question is LaJoie has finished very well in his duels in situations like this, to where he's finishing 17th, or he's starting 17th, and we see him finishing 11th, 10th, 9th, and 8th, which will also, Bobby, we're just flat out we're trying to land on like the top like 7 finishers in this race, not necessarily like what they score DraftKings wise. Traditionally, if you've been able to land basically how the field finishes, you're going to land on the optimal lineup. Going back, LaJoie has been a driver who has made that not be the norm, in a sense of he's been able to get to be a very good optimal play, or a very good / optimal play in these races specifically, due to the place differential that he offers. He's a driver that typically races in these, and with everybody chasing Truex, Chastain, or Truex, Reddick, and drivers like that, I think LaJoie is answering that question sheets. And I think if you're playing LaJoie, I think you should play Hocevar as well, because I don't see a situation where those two don't leave each other's side this entire race.
And guys like I've heard of, like Larson and Truex, and guys that are always competing for like top fives in like the main races. I mean, are they just going to like tour around the track? You know what I mean? Like, or it seems like these are guys that have most to lose by by doing whatever, or are these guys going to like try to race hard too?
So we've seen when we look at when Hendrick has gotten the lead, typically the driver, or when they've gotten the pole in the past, the Hendrick drivers who have started first in each duel, they typically ride, whereas everybody else out of the Hendrick stable races. And so when we look at Larson, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman in ninth, these are all drivers that I view as people who are going to finish inside the top 7 today, unless they completely mess something up in the pit strategy, if somebody speeds or whatever the case may be. These are 3 drivers who should fight to finish in the top 7 today. And so, like, kind of going back of what the field is doing and versus what I'm doing, I'm mainly playing the guys who are starting up front, not due to the fact that they're starting up front, they're going to hold on, but these drivers are typically the better drivers at these races, and they maintain a running position inside the top 10 in the duels specifically. Larson, Logano, Austin Dillon, Chastain, Buescher, Bowman, and Suarez fit all these categories that I'm looking at.
Nice. Man, I got a lot of learning to do.
It's fun, Bobby, because every week's a new thing. Like, there's nothing that really rolls over to anything else. Thank you, everybody else who's watching this right now. I do appreciate everybody tuning in.
So, like in these races tonight, like you're never getting somebody sub 10% owned, probably, right? They're all going to be double digit owned, right?
I don't think so. I think ownership should be spread out. Maybe, let me think. I mean, honestly, Yaley should be the only like guy, maybe like single digit owned. Possibly Todd Gilliland and Preece. But I like they should even be double digit owned as well.
Do they have chances? I mean, like,
even though Yaley is projected to be the highest owned or second highest owned, I guess, what is it? On Sabres?
Yeah, I do not believe that. Quality Assurance should have caught that. I think that is a terrible projection. And so honestly, I'm not even looking at the SaberSim ownership. I'm just trying to go for a gut feel. I think realistically, of people who actually have a chance of doing something and helping you out, that those drivers would be Todd Gilliland, Preece, and Daniel Hemrick as drivers who would be low owned that I would that I currently have exposure to. Let me see what I currently have those 3 drivers at, because those would be guys that I would realistically want. So I have 60. Also, I'm doing 20 lines for everybody who doesn't know. I have 16% Hemrick right now. I have Gilliland at 5, and I have Preece at 20% right now. And I think that's going to be either with the field or over the field on those guys.
Gotcha.
Now, do you do anything that we talk about, sometimes with basketball and hockey and stuff, like with min uniques or anything like that? Or you just you don't even care about that? I mean, you'll like if you have all lines look the same with just one different driver, that's cool with you. I mean, where do you try to get where do you try to diversify a little bit more?
So let me look at my stuff, because actually, so this entire week, I actually just hand build every single lineup. I don't use optimizers at these races. It's very time consuming, but I have found that it's worth it. And so I typically break my 20 lineups into around, out of the 20 lineups, I usually have about 10 or 12 looking similar. And when we look at those specifically, or when we look at those 12 lines specifically, they're kind of broken up into like 4 groups. And so 4 of those 12 lines are built very similar. In terms of uniques between those, it's probably like 2 in that group. And then I have another group of 4 that's completely different from the first 4 I just looked at, but those would be built around like the 4 same drivers, and then probably 2 min uniques in that. So I typically build groups of like, whether I'm chasing manufacturers, whether I'm chasing certain teams, that's usually how I'm breaking the groups up. And so in terms of min uniques in a race like this, if I was going to use an optimizer, I'd probably set it to 2. And I would probably take out Yaley. I would take Yaley out of the player pool and run it with 20 cars with the rest of the field, and do a min unique of 2.
Now, you mentioned manufacturers. So I asked you this a couple of times over the last couple of years. It seemed like we always, Bobby and I, we always talk about different sports, about where it's right to stack, like baseball players, hockey players, whatever it is, that one benefits from the other. And I always felt in my ignorant head that in car racing, if you have cars racing from the same team, they would tend to work together, and either, and I don't know what that means. Like, so, like, to give you an example, just because like teams work together doesn't mean they're going to finish all together as well, because take like horse racing, for example. Like horse racing, what they would used to do is they would have two horses, they would enter together from the same owner, and one of them would be completely used to like be a rabbit and like just gut the rest of the field if the other one was a closer. So even though those two were working together, one was working but knowing he would finish last, to propel the other one. So how does it work? No, you would think that it goes two ways. So manufacturers,
grab the door for a minute.
You'd think first of all that if things are going good, in the garage, then it's probably good for all the cars, right? But what about how is that accurate? And also, what about like race strategy? How does that affect stacking or anything like that?
So one of the things that we've seen specifically since this next gen car has come out, it happened. It used to happen with the older generation too, but the manufacturers have been like very much pushing upon the drivers and teams to directly not work with competing manufacturers. And so, like, if you look at like the Chevrolet camp, they've specifically they've told their drivers outright, like, we do not want to see you pushing a Ford to a victory in this race, in races like this. And so in terms of working as a team, that's why when I like bring up like the pitting and how they're going to team up or how they would like these cars are going to line up and stuff. This is a situation, especially with Ford and Toyota bringing in new cars, that I don't think we're going to see much intermingling between the manufacturers once like the grid kind of spreads out, maybe like by like lap 8 or 9. At that point, I'm going to assume that like the Fords have kind of worked their way to kind of where all the Fords are together. The Chevys are kind of all together. The Toyotas are kind of all together. And so kind of going back to stacking and stuff, like if people are playing place differential in this race, I don't believe this is a race that you want one place differential from. If I was chasing place differential in either of these races, I would specifically like build like a lineup with like 3 to 4 Toyotas in there, because this is not a situation where one Toyota is going to work out. It's going to be a situation where all the Toyotas work out or none of them do. And so like kind of like, esports or whatever, especially like league, like that would be very correlated. Like the two races today would be very correlated with the manufacturer that the cars are in your lineups.
So I was like the kid raising his hand in the back. So I was about to ask. So you keep mentioning the Toyotas, and I was going to ask first of all, well, which are the Toyota guys? And when you answer that, everybody's going to know except for me. If you wouldn't mind, like in the future, like if in the spreadsheets, in like the projections, you put like the manufacturers as one of the columns or something. Maybe that would be helpful.
Yeah, I can do that. I will.
If you think it's worth it, you know what I mean. But yeah. So who are the Toyota guys, by the way?
Here, Let me make sure I'm hiding my lineups here on accident. Yeah. But I'll bring it up on screen here because the Stukas actually posted this earlier. So this is duel number 1. Sorry,
I'm sure I can just Google it in 2 seconds. You know what I mean? But I was just.
Yeah. So let's bring this up here. I don't know if you can read
so
this.
The teams are important, and I guess the manufacturers are important too. Okay.
Actually, let me go back here. Let me get it. I think that should be bigger. I don't know if you can necessarily see this. But so this lists all the drivers in duel number 1 that are under the Chevy banner. When we look at teams, like, as I've stated, like Anthony Alfredo has made the race, Beard Motorsports, I don't even see them like worrying about like racing or whatever. Like their main concern is we've just made it. Let's not tear the car up. And so in my opinion, we eliminate that from the Chevy family. We eliminate JJ Yaley from the Chevy family. And we look at the different teams here. So we have like Hendrick, like the guys who have been dominating speed at these plate races, specifically the Daytona opening weekend for a decade now. If you're playing Bowman, it's very unlikely that he works and Elliott and Larson don't also finish right beside him. When we look at Spire, as I mentioned, LaJoy and Hocevar, they should be like joined at the hip. Chastain, Suarez should be joined at the hip. And so you can look at this as like, well, if the Chevys are going to work out, I not only, want to have a lot of Hendrick guys in that, I also want to play the other Chevy guys who are going to be around them equivalent in speed or like how their setups are. And so that would be the Hendrick guys, the Trackhouse guys, the Spire guys, and like Stenhouse and Hemrick. So if you're doing that, you'd probably want like 4 to 5 Chevy guys in your lineup or whatever. I completely forgot the second question that you asked.
No, that was the other thing I was going to ask is, it's just about like race strategy and stuff. Like so would you consider putting, whatchamacallit, guys that are from the same team together, with the idea that they would kind of help each other a little bit. But again, it goes back to just because they're helping each other doesn't mean that they're going to finish together.
I would answer that I think in these two races, it's very unlikely that they all don't finish well.
Okay, because you've answered me. I've asked you this like a couple of different times, and the implication I get is good idea, Sheets, but it doesn't really work out that way. It seems as though these teams would kind of like all finish 1, 2, 3, or they wouldn't, but it just doesn't necessarily just work out that way. Which is why I asked. By the way, if you guys interested in know what I'm doing like right now, so and this is the way I made all my money in my life is using information that people know better than I am and trying to apply it. So each time I have my SaberSim stuff up, and each time Brandon mentions a guy that he likes, I'm literally just upping his exposure in my SaberSim. And that's it, And every time he's saying, I don't, this guy I really don't need to play, I'm literally Xing him out. That's kind of the way I'm handling it, So that's that's what I'm.
No, it makes sense.
And I want to also answer that anybody who's in the Discord and stuff, I posted my exposures for these races as I've built out the day, or as I've built throughout the day. The dual one is completely done. Like I'm not going to change anything on those. I still have a few lineups in dual 2. But whenever that's done, I'll post my exposure in the Discord as well, so everybody can kind of see just kind of where I'm falling in line at. Do we want to move on to the second duel, or do you guys have any more questions? Yeah. What about you, Bobby? Do you have anything specific?
No, I feel like I got a little player pool from what you were saying, and I'm just throwing in there for fun. I like it. Yeah. I'm just trying to see if trying to do what Sheets does. This is what I was telling Sheets that this is like it's like an old golf show we used to do with Sheets. I have no idea what the hell he's talking about or anything. Right. Now golf is my favorite time of the week. So who knows what the future holds? Yeah, now I'm ready for the second one.
All right. So when we go ahead and look at the second duel, we see a situation of where, let me bring this up. And so this is, and I'll make this bigger next time, or I'll at least add this on. So this is the second duel broken down in manufacturers yet again. Thank you for Astukas for putting this in the Discord and stuff. And so you can see compared to the first duel, the first one has a ton of Chevys, and the second duel has a ton of Fords. That's it. It's like one leans one side, one leans the other and stuff. And so very similar as the first duel, if I'm playing guys who I think are going to be up front and maintain a running position, between and finish, or let me say that. I want to play guys mainly starting between 14th and 4th. Okay. And so if I'm playing guys there, I kind of want to try and stack teams. I kind of want to stack manufacturers. And so people that are looking good in this race that I would want to play and that I want to primarily focus on would be, first and foremost, Brad Keselowski. He is the most talented driver in this field, currently in this car for plate races. The second most talented guy in this field is Denny Hamlin, and he's in a Toyota. And so I'm at a juxtaposition to where I don't really see situations of where both of them work well together. I think a lot of the field is going to play them together. But when we look at the amount of help that the Fords have, and you really can't remove anybody from this. Like McDowell starting first, or in this duel, starting second on Sunday. And so he really doesn't have an incentive to ride. He's just trying to get Kaz Grala into the race, who's currently starting last just because they didn't have good qualifying.
Oh, he's the guy from this race that's at risk?
The people who are racing in from this race are Kaz Grala and BJ McLeod. Very similar to the first one. It's like not even a competition. Kaz Grala is in a Porsche. BJ McLeod is literally on a bicycle. Like, it's not even a competition.
Okay.
So that doesn't
How do you spell
have
that
any impact
name?
on DFS.
I don't know who that is.
Which one?
What does that mean?
Kaz Grala, last name Grala.
Oh, his last name is Year. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, sorry.
No. Look, I'm a total newbie, so I'm just trying to ask.
And so when I'm building for this one, if I'm playing Denny Hamlin yet again, I would want to play Denny Hamlin, Bell, Wallace, and I would throw Nemechek in that, because it's not just going to be Hamlin or Bell working in the situation. You would have all four of the Toyotas be lined up and working together through this race. And in order for them to do that, they would have to get past the Fords, who are going to be doing the exact same thing, working together in a pack. And so I'm not really doing a lot of like just one-off plays between manufacturers. If I'm playing the Fords, I'm specifically chasing Noah Gragson, Josh Berry, Briscoe, Brad Keselowski. Like, those are probably my like core drivers. I know that's 5, but out of the majority of my lineups, I have like 3 to 4 of those guys in like every single line. I think they're the main plays you need to build around in this event.
Now, do you regard McLeod as like JJ Yeley, like just going to go laps down and just not playable?
I don't see him being viable at all. Let me look through.
Who's the other one you said wasn't viable?
JJ Yeley from the first race.
Yeah, Yaley. I thought there was somebody else from this one.
I would not play Kaz Grala. I would not play Kaz Grala and BJ McLeod in this one.
Gotcha.
And when I look at how I'm building specifically, I am primary using. I know I mentioned like the 5 guys, but my highest owned driver in this race is Keselowski, and the second one is Ryan Blaney. Those are the 2 guys that I want to be overweight on the field with, and I think they're going to be the 2 most popular drivers in this race. They might not actually, because Hamlin is probably going to. This is where, like, because I don't do ownerships, and I can't really trust any ownerships that are out there right now, so I have to like go gut feeling. I'm trying to think. I think Hamlin will be the most owned driver in this race. I think Keselowski would probably be second. I think Blaney would probably be third. The reason why that's important is because Hamlin, I would just take a guess, is probably going to push 35 to 39, possibly 40%. Whereas Keselowski and Blaney are going to be slightly below that, and I'd rather be overweight on those 2 than Hamlin. For everybody watching. Thank you, Wolf of Ball Street, in the comments. I do appreciate that.
So you don't think like McDowell, like from the poll, is gonna? I mean, he's just gonna he's already got his second place, and not second place, his position second at Daytona in the 500.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's got to win something if he wins, though, right? I mean, but then again, he's got to actually win to justify the first. Well, no, he doesn't. Like, what if he comes in like 4th or something?
He still starts second on Sunday, regardless of where he finishes. He could start in park and still finish second.
But is that
still
good
start second on Sunday?
If he gets 4th, is that good enough for him here? Probably. Right?
I'm kind of going on to that, and so when we look at situations to where McDowell doesn't stay up front, it turns into who is the leader? Who's going to be leading these lines? The primary beneficiary of McDowell like backing down and not leading in this race, whereas like where I think Logano is going to stay up there and lead, I think that brings Austin Cindric into play to be a primary lap leader, especially with so many Fords in this race. If this race ends up going green, the fact that Austin Cindric will be the highest starting Ford driver up there once McDowell drops off, it would be very difficult for another Ford to overtake him under the green flag. And so, like, I think Cindric is in line to get laps led. It's not a primary thing we want to focus on in a race like this, Bobby, because there's only 60 laps. but I think everybody should have like honestly 20 to 25% of Cindric, because I think he's going to come at it like 15, 17%. And in the situations where he leads laps, I think he's going to not only fight to be a top 7 finisher in this race, but I think he can lead a majority of his laps if it stays green.
So what I would do sometimes, Bobby, and not this race, but in races where laps led were like a really big deal, like shorter tracks with a lot of laps, really, and that's the best way to describe it, is sometimes it's as easy as whoever's on the pole, if you could have the number 2 guy get ahead of him, it could just lead for like a long, long time. So I would sometimes do like min 1, like the top 2 guys who rate to have speed at the top. So it's not as clear cut today, right? But like if you thought, for example, that McDowell was either going to lead or he wasn't, right? Then you could go min 1 of like McDowell or Cindric. And listen, that maybe they're not going to win the race, but in some races, those like you can't take away the laps led. You know what I mean? You just can't do it. So there are people that can lead like a billion laps, then completely collapse, get into a wreck, finish 28th, and still have like 50 fantasy points. You know, because of all those laps. But in a race like this with not that many laps, it's just a little harder.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I would reiterate that today, if I would run, but I mean I ran my projections in SaberSim, just the lineup builder, just to see like what the builds are. Those would be ones that I would follow, Bobby. If you honestly, like, if you don't want a hand build or whatever, like I would trust my projections.
So there's no like outlier awful projections like the Yaley one, like in the.
I haven't looked at so I saw the outlier in the first one, and I was like, I'm not even gonna waste my time looking at the second one, honestly. So let me actually take a look here and see what I don't agree with. Like, man, they got Kazgrala. Like, SaberSim is pushing this as if it was like a Wreckfest race, and I do not agree with that. So like this one here, they're pushing like Kazgrala, they're pushing BJ McLeod. I don't agree with that at all.
So normally, Bobby, what happens, and you'll see this on Sunday, the Daytona 500, is that guys that are all the way at the back are just way popular, okay? Because what happens is this is my sheet's way of explaining this in a non-NASCAR way. So because there are 2 things going on, it's a plate race, which means that all cars are probably built very similarly. Nobody's gonna be that much faster than anybody, so they tend to all be bunched up. It's very difficult to kind of run away. And the other thing that also creates the opportunity for a lot of accidents, because everybody's so bunched up like that. So what happens is if there's this big accident, which it happens almost every race, you get 14 cars that all just get wiped out. These guys that are just in the 38 hole, just like sitting there like waiting, you know what I mean? If they just avoid the wreck, they get like all these differential points, you know? So that's why I guess what SaberSim is doing is like you said, just treating this like a regular race like that these guys have just so much place differential upside. But what Brandon was saying is a big difference between the Daytona 500 and this race, because the Daytona 500, people are taking the risks, which are gonna cause those wrecks to happen. You know, this race, everybody's just kind of tooling around, you know, and it's and less laps, so less opportunities for that stuff to happen, and less macro, you know what I mean, and less of a good environment for that to happen.
Yeah, and looking at the chat, specifically Andrew's question, so I would play Bell over Hamlin. When we look at these 2 drivers specifically in the terms of how they've performed in their duels in previous years, they're very similar in terms of that they finish up front and they typically finish in the top 8. But I would take the less ownership on Bell specifically here. But I know this one isn't necessarily a Wreckfest, but at Daytona where anything can happen, I typically want to, if it's a head-to-head, ownership will be the deciding factor for me. And so like when we look at Bell starting 16th and Hamlin starting 17th, they're an identical play. They're the exact same play, basically the exact same projection. Lower ownership is on Bell. That means I'm just going to play Bell over Hamlin.
Well, I'll tell you now, the answer is usually when somebody asks that question, the answer is usually just play them both. So.
Oh yeah, or I mean, yeah, you can do that too. Yeah. Let's see. What else? What else do I have? Do you have any specific question sheets on this one, or are you Bobby in here? Or
no, I'm just screwing around. You know,
where can I watch it? I'm just curious where you can even like watch. Where do I watch these things?
This will be on FS1.
Okay.
If you have television, or if you're just like me, you can find it online on a random link.
And a couple of things. So the one real thing I'm kind of not fighting, is what to do with those McLeod Growler things. Like I'm considering just Xing them out. You know what I mean? Especially if you don't like them, not to put all the pressure on you, right? But especially if you don't like them and they're getting ownership because people are like miscalculating what this race is going to look like. I mean, I'll just freaking X them. You know what I mean? Let them go 3 laps down, have a bad car. You know what I mean? And as long as this race stays clean, I'm like, they're just not getting there. Because again, this is like, but then again, on the other hand, there are these other guys that are dependent on place differential that are just in better cars, right? Like, or better drivers, like Hamlin and Nemechek and Christopher Bell, like you mentioned. That's my main. I'm probably just gonna X them, whatever, and just see what happens. But
yeah. So in duel number 2, I mean, there's no pressure on me. I'm not playing these guys anyway. So the people that I don't have any exposure to in duel number 2 are AJ Allmendinger. I have no AJ. I have no Zane Smith. I have no BJ, and I have no Kaz Gralla.
And why is that? Just because you don't, or is there a reason? You know what I mean? Like this, specifically AJ Allmendinger and Zane Smith. Is it just because you didn't get to them, or because you actively don't like them? You know what I mean?
So McDowell is a teammate to Zane Smith and Kaz Gralla. Kaz Gralla, who had a mechanical failure yesterday, who didn't even get to do a qualifying time, should beat McLeod. But since McDowell is guaranteed to start second, we've seen in the past that Front Row Motorsports, who has brought a third car into these races before, specifically bring all their team members to the back of the pack to help their open car like get into the race. And so I think Zane Smith and Gralla are going to be together, where Zane Smith is going to be helping like Gralla make sure he gets into the race. And since they're racing against McLeod, that's going to be in the backfield. I'm not playing those drivers there.
Beautiful.
With AJ, that comes from the fact that this race has virtually no Chevrolets. You have Byron, AJ, McLeod, Kyle Busch as the and Zane Smith in a Chevy. I actually just went blank. I totally forgot Zane Smith was not with Front Row anymore, or Front Row Motorsports anymore. But I digress. Zane Smith is just basically an independent car here. He doesn't have any teammates. The Chevys are low. Like, I just don't foresee Zane Smith doing anything in this race. I don't.
So it's not because he's going to go back with Growler stuff. It's just because you don't like the car and him in general.
Yeah, correct. I've been going over so much stuff. I was like, oh yeah, Zane Smith is not in a front row car anymore. But yeah, so that is why I haven't, or that's why I'm not going to have any exposure to these individuals.
And Allmendinger, you said because he's the only Chevrolet. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, and so in this situation, I think the Fords and Toyotas are going to overwhelm what the Chevy camp can do, because they basically only have 3 viable cars in this situation. And I would just rather lean into the Fords and Toyotas, like actually overpowering the Chevys out of the top 10 in this race.
Okay. The other thing, Bobby, is that it's a weird sweat. It's a little bit of a blend, because you in your normal Daytona race, you literally have no idea what you're doing. You can't even sweat, you know what I mean? Because nothing matters until there's an accident. I mean, you're picking up like little tiny chunks of the only thing that you're picking up is little like laps led stuff and fast laps, which amount to very little in these types of races. And they always could take turns in these races doing it. And then at the end, you know, and then they give you credit for your place finish right from the beginning. So like if you're on the pole, you're going to start off with like a whole bunch of fantasy points, you know,
right.
Like for a while. But it's not like basketball, because you lose fantasy points.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you start off, it's like kind of like Golf Showdown, where you start off, I mean, like round 4 Golf Showdown, you start out with a certain amount of points, but once you go back through the field, you lose them. You know, so
right.
You're getting excited that you're in. You know what I mean about anything. until maybe you get into an accident or something like that. So it is kind of a weird sweat, like especially these types of races on the draft team side.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad that Cheats brought up Showdown Golf because I don't play that, but I've never been able to think of anything that it's like. Because, as he just said, this is the only DFS sport to where like you don't have LeBron James scoring 50 and then losing all that in the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter.
Right.
Whereas that can happen here.
But that's the thing; they give them credit as soon as the race starts with where they started, right? And then you lose it all. Like if you start out with 50 fantasy points, like if you go to the back of the field, you have 0. You know what I mean? Like it's
right.
But it doesn't matter at the end of the day because when you finish, they give you credit for your finishing points, which are what the same as they were when you started the race. You started the race in first. They started you at 50, and then whoever gets I'm making that up. Is it 50, Brandon? If you win the race,
50 what?
Is it 50 fantasy points if you win the race?
It is. It's 45.
45, whatever it is. So they start whoever's in the hole with 45 fantasy points as the race starts, and then at the end of the race, whoever comes in wherever, they keep on updating where you are, and then it is kind of cool because you get near the end, you could see what you need. You could see, well, I need this guy to pass that guy, especially with only 6 drivers. And basically the field having every combination, and you're probably duping like 20 people like in these types of tournaments. You start to learn like who you need to pass and stuff like that. But the Discord should be fun. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean I know it changes a lot, but for me, Bobby, this is probably the easiest sport to follow live time.
Really?
Like
sounds like the opposite,
because like I literally have an iPad just to use for like NASCAR live scoring because I'll go through and just look at lines. I won't even look at when I'm winning, losing, like that doesn't matter to me.
Yeah,
but I can, like, for me it's very easy to understand how somebody is scoring, what they're scoring, and what lines have a chance of like succeeding or not, or what they need to happen here. I think it's very easy to follow live, unlike other sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
like
that's cool.
Today should be like as like an intro, especially if you're gonna like watch it. I think it'll be easy for you to understand why somebody's scoring well, why somebody isn't scoring well, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. No, nice. No, I appreciate learning about it. I feel it's weird to feel so lost in something, like so close to something that I'm like used to doing, but I appreciate you guys like having me like on and just, teaching me a little bit about this, and I'm going to try out a few things tonight. But yeah, no, it sounds like a lot of fun. It's just something I totally can't wrap my head around. I think I need to watch it and try to like sweat it to like figure it out, because I've literally like never watched anything.
Yeah, I should have when I started this, I didn't even think about it. I should have asked you what, like, you as somebody who's like ignorant to this sport and how to play it. Like, what do you see when you first open? Because I've been so removed from that, I don't even understand how somebody who doesn't play this like sees everything. Like, do you automatically think whoever's like priced well is like who you should be playing?
I mean, you'd think that the better. I mean, in every other sport that I play, yeah, the better players are usually the ones who are priced the most. But when you were explaining what they needed to do and everything, it made a lot of sense to me. So I actually appreciate that, because I had no idea why. Like, I don't know, like why somebody would be priced different than the other. I still didn't even understand. I understand what pole position means, but I don't really I don't know enough about it to understand how valuable that even is. You know what I mean? I'm like a total novice. Couldn't know less about this. Anyway, I appreciate this bit of learning. I'm sorry if it's frustrating for some of the viewers, because that's maybe not as interesting to hear like somebody else ask that stuff. But for me, it's helpful, and hopefully for some other new viewers, it's helpful to just sort of like try to look at it from a newbie's perspective. Because I know what it's like to be on your side, Brandon. Like with everything else I do, I talk about it and I'm like, oh, I forget some people actually don't know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Anyway, but yeah, this is all a whole new world for me.
Yeah, and I mean also like most weeks, kind of answering some of the feedback that I'm getting in the live show. Like, this is Daytona. Like, there's no practice data to go over. There, like, recent form doesn't mean anything here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is its own animal. Like we can't really do a traditional format. Like normally what I do, like, and I even do here, like I did last week, like I'll look at the practice data, say, oh, this guy should be played because he's showing speed off the trailer this weekend. We don't have any of that. Like, I mean, there's not really much to really say other than like, oh, I want to like see how Bobby is seeing this. I want to speak to it from like him coming into this. That's why I want to do it like this.
No, I appreciate that. I actually do. For me, it's very helpful. But it's also like I still feel like there's a million things I need to figure out and understand about this stuff. But this is definitely a good start.
Yeah. So kind of reiterating just really fast, kind of before we end it. You guys are still going live in like 30 minutes to do
basketball.
the NBA?
Yeah, at 7:30 Eastern. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
At least I'll be there.
Yeah, let me just go over for anybody who's just jumping in of who I'm the highest on between these two duels. So in duel number 1, my favorite drivers in duel number 1 are Buescher, Suarez, and Chastain based on how much I have them in lineups. And I roughly have each of those in half of my lineups. And then in duel number 2, I have Keselowski, Bell, and Blaney as my favorite plays in duel number 2. For anybody just hopping in at the end, since duel number 1 goes live in about 30 minutes. Answering Mark's question,
who would be your the highest owned guy that you're fading? How about that? I mean, who do you think is bad chalk?
Well, it sounded like the cheap guy from the first race, who Brandon doesn't think is going to be owned, but he's projected to be owned like crazy. I don't know how much projections mean.
Yeah, I mean, like if Yaley and those guys carry any ownership, I think those lines are just dead on arrival.
Nice.
In terms of duel number 1, and I'll answer Mark's question after this. It would probably be Truex in duel number 1. He would probably be the guy that I want to have the least ownership to in duel number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Of drivers that people are playing, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then in duel number 2, if you're stacking Toyota with Ford mixed in, I would specifically play Wallace, Bell, and Hamlin together. Like if I'm playing Toyota, I'm probably playing 3 of them in duel number 2. And I wouldn't really want to just have 2 of them. If you are doing 2, it's Walla and Bell as your primary guys you want to focus on. But as I said, I think it's very unlikely that 2 or 1 of the Toyotas work. It should be all 3 of them together with however they end up performing.
Why don't you remind everybody what the schedule is for the weekend?
So this weekend on Friday, or tomorrow rather, we have the Truck Series race, and I will be live at, what time did I set this up at? I'll be live tomorrow at same time, 5 o'clock my time, 6 o'clock Eastern. Saturday is still like jury's out. Like there's going to be a monsoon in Daytona this weekend and possibly into Monday. The only time that it's not raining tomorrow is in the evening, and there is projected to be a lot of rain on Sunday as well. And so I don't know what I'm doing for the Xfinity Series on Saturday. Regardless, I'm doing a Cup Series preview or live show at 10 a.m. Eastern on Sunday. Whether the 500 is on Sunday, whether it's on Monday, I'm doing Sunday 10 o'clock Eastern time to talk about the Cup Series.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good. I might jump out of here in a minute, just finish up my basketball stuff.
Yep. Me too.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it, Brandon. It's always it's impressive to hear what you're talking about, even though I don't understand half of it. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's great. It's great. I actually really enjoy it. So thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem. I'm so excited. I've been waiting for this for like 2 months now.
Nice.
Doing it in front of this audience and stuff like that. I think unless you have anything else you want to talk about, Sheets, I think we can both wrap it up here.
I'm good.
Awesome. Take us out.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate the live viewers, 64 of you guys here. And best of luck in the duels. And I'll see you guys tomorrow and Sunday, at least for sure. Saturday, I'll tweet out if I'm going live for the Xfinity Series whenever I decide what the schedule is and stuff. So best of luck, y'all.
See you later, guys.